Thanks everybody for joining us today. Today's webinar again is with Mark Simon. So this is the third installment in a three-part series. Today's webinar will be about storyboarding in the gaming industry. Mark Simon has a long history of boarding and is extremely familiar with our software. He's basically one of our best friends in the industry, if we could say. He'll be talking about his work as well as his career, and he'll be offering some great tips within gaming. I'll pass it over to Mark, but just before I do, please note you guys can write in any questions you have in the questions field. We'll answer them towards the end of the webinar, and we'll do our best to give you as much information as possible. This webinar is also being recorded and will be posted online within the next few days. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Desi. Yeah, so this will be fun. So we're wrapping up the whole thing with this, and I'll tell you what, you guys help me out. We'll make this the best one yet. So my name is Mark Simon. I've been in the, well, let me just kind of take you through a little bit of my background here. So we're going to be talking about boarding for games, and I started in the industry. Whoops, jumped back too much. I actually started in the industry almost 30 years ago. The picture there on the left, that's me without the sleeves on. That's when I was working at Roger Corman's studio down in Venice. Yes, the king of B-budget movies. That was a classic midnight movie called Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity. I got to do everything. I was the art director on it, but I designed a lot of special effects and the miniatures. This is a foreground miniature that you see there that I'm standing in, and it matched up perfectly with the set behind. So it was just amazing stuff. And also, so I did everything from feature films to commercials, TV shows. There's an infomercial I designed on the right-hand side for Jetstream Oven, which I ended up walking out with 3 of those. I actually really like those things. I'm also a syndicated cartoonist, the strip called Hollyweird, which you can find online at sunnyfundays.com. And a number of you may be familiar with some of my books. I've written 10 books on the industry. The main one that a lot of people know me from, at least in the industry, is my storyboard book there in the middle, Storyboards, Motion, and Art. The 3rd edition has been out the last few years. It is the Bible of the industry now. It's sold in, I don't know, 6 or 7 languages around the world. But artists in general are generally more familiar with my line of facial expressions books. These photo references for artists where I take up to 50 models in each one, holding a variety of expressions, and I shoot them from all different angles. So you can draw from more than just your mirror. So I did this because I needed it. So literally this was what I wanted, so I wrote it. And I'm also, I'm not practicing martial arts anymore, so if you see me on the street, don't try to hit me because you'll hurt me. But in my 40s, I did become a 2-time national champion in Taekwondo. I'm a 2nd-degree black belt. I've gotten into playing other sports now with my kids. So that was definitely a lot of fun. So after art directing and my time at Nickelodeon, I helped open up the Nickelodeon studios. And while I was at Nick, I decided to start doing some storyboarding. And then I left Nickelodeon to work with Spielberg on a series. And this is actually from a couple other movies. On the left there, actually both of these are from working with Larry the Cable Guy on Tooth Fairy 2. I was the animation producer, and I boarded all the live action for the movie as well. And this is the director in the blue hoodie, Alex Zam. He and I've done, I think, 3 or 4 features together now. This is when I was working on the Spielberg series Sequest. I don't know how many of you would remember that, but it's kind of like Star Trek underwater. I was the board artist, and I was one of the 2nd unit directors, and I'm directing a sequence of giant robots that were destroying this facility here that we're standing in. So at this point, I've got over 4,000 production credits. Obviously, most of them are commercials, but we do a lot. I mean, this past month, I've done well over 3 dozen projects. Before we started recording, I was talking about the fact that yesterday I started working on a feature, which unfortunately I can't say anything about because of my contract. But we're just wrapping up 2 pilots that I'm directing as well. Luckily, I only have to give notes now, which is late night work. Since I'm working on the feature during the day. And I've got a number of other artists helping me out on other projects. So just real quick, here's a couple other projects, a few other projects that I've worked on over the years. I was the animation producer on both of these, and also did the boards on them. I think everything in here I also did the boards between Sequest and the Waterboy. In fact, the Waterboy, one of my claims to fame is, for those of you who remember it, there's when the Fonz, Henry Winkler, turns around and drops trowel and he's got a tattoo on his ass. That's my artwork. God damn. Magic City, You're Next. What a great horror film. That was one of those, because of using Storyboard Pro, I was able to do the entire thing long distance. I never met the director or the producer on this, and I was able to share my screen as I was drawing digitally using Skype. So it was like sitting right next to them, even though we were half a country apart. They couldn't afford to fly me out there, so we put all the money that they saved on travel into my time so that I could board all the major gory sequences. So again, Storyboard Pro, I couldn't have done it without that. Then Dragon Tales, I actually didn't do the boards on that, but I was the creative supervisor. I went over all the boards on it. Did the first season of 82 some odd episodes. For those of you who are young enough to remember Nickelodeon Guts, I was one of the original designers of the Aggro Crag. Then, of course, all my years at Nickelodeon, and then I got into creating and pitching ideas and helping other people with pitching their own ideas. This is actually a photo of me pitching to Chorus over here on the right at one of the big TV conferences that we go to all the time. And I do a lot of speaking. I mean, obviously you guys are listening to me drone on and on here, but like on the left here, I was part of a contingent, one of the first contingents to speak about animation in China about 10 years ago, however long ago it was. And then on the right is the Ottawa International Animation Festival. I was doing, that was a really good event specifically for Storyboard Pro, where I did a live demonstration there. And then I do a lot of training at studios around the world. This is one of the studios in Mexico that I helped set up onto Storyboard Pro. Toon Boom sent me down there for a week, and I got the studio going. I did the same thing for Digital Domain and a few other studios around the US and Mexico. And I'm also the ugliest, absolutely ugliest cheerleader you'll ever see. All right, let's get off of that. So anyway, so now I own a storyboard company, Animatics Storyboards. I also own an animation studio. Do mostly short form, although I produce elements for features as well, as I showed earlier, different music videos and commercials and pieces that we've done over the years. And then with my wife, we also created Sell Your TV Concept Now, helping people with how to develop, package, and pitch TV shows, because we've sold a lot of our ideas, and people kept asking us how we did it. So this is actually a group that I brought out to Kidscreen a couple years ago, and the gentleman here in the center, the tall guy in the center, he, at this show, actually bought a deal from these two guys in the upper left. So that was a very cool event. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be focusing on some of the things that are most specific to using Storyboard Pro in gaming, and answering some of the other questions people had asked about gaming and boarding for games. But if you want more specifics on how to use Storyboard Pro, there's a lot of great stuff on the Toon Boom website. But we also have a large program on lynda.com, and I've got 67 videos there. 8 of them are free for anyone if you have the service, or if you're in a school or a school district that gives you access, like I know Orlando's in Orange County. All Orange County schools have access to lynda.com. You can see everything there. It doesn't cost very much, but it's amazing. You can learn any program, anything you want to do there. But if you go to lynda.com/Mark Simon, I delve into all the absolute specifics, every button to hit and every shortcut to take to really know how to make use of Storyboard Pro. All right, so just so you kind of get an idea of my setup and what I'm working on, I use 2 different types of Cintiqs. One of my favorites to draw on is actually my small companion, Cintiq Companion 2. It's a totally portable Windows 10 or Windows 8 computer with the Windows monitor built into it. It's lightweight, it's quick, it's easy, it's super fast. I like boarding on that rather than my big Cintiq, because boards are quick and rough, and the smaller screen I tend to draw faster, because on a bigger screen you tend to add more detail that you don't need. But what I'm using here for this presentation is my 22-inch HD touch screen Cintiq. Obviously it's fantastic. We would have more real estate to be able to draw when you're doing illustrations or really getting into doing the editing. So this is, just close your eyes and imagine this, and this is what I look like at the moment as I'm working on this with you. All right, so let's get into some of the specifics on boarding for games. I'm going to get into a number of different things, but there's a reason I want to start with numbering, because it's one of the things that is incredibly important, but people don't pay enough attention to. So the numbering for, there's two different ways of numbering things in gaming. One is for gameplay, another is for the cinematics. And for those of you who aren't familiar, cinematic are the pre-produced movies that play within a game, either the starting of the game or in between different levels. So cinematic numbering is numbered just the same way that we do live action in CG. The reason I bring that up, 2D animation, for those of you, because I know a number of you from animation, 2D animation, every time that the camera cuts, it becomes a new scene. Whereas in 3D or in live action, every scene has a lot of different shots. So as long as the camera cuts and we're in the same location, those are different shots within the same scene. We change scene when we change time or change location. Okay, so that's how we do in gaming. We have scenes and shots, and then what the panels represents is if it takes you 4 drawings to show an action, it's 4 panels within one scene or one shot. Now for gameplay, there's really 2 different types of things that can happen when you're developing a game. You either have combos, like you could have combo 101, one action, or combo 1-02 is a different action. It's just and every studio has slightly different ways of numbering. Make sure you know how they do it, because it's your job to number the way that the studio in that project is working. And then there's if-then. So if I kill my opponent, then this happens. If they kill me, then that happens. So it's if-then statements. If A, this, if B, that. Relatively simple. Okay, so one of the questions, and I saw some came in here, but I also got some earlier as I was talking to people about this. So if you want a board for games, what are they looking for in your portfolio? Well, if they're looking for board artists for cinematics, not the gameplay, for cinematics, which is generally what they're looking for board artists, are the cinematics. They're not looking necessarily for gaming experience, because great cinematics are very cinematic. They're, which I guess that's why we call it cinematics, but they're like feature films. So they're actually looking for film board artists, people with movie experience. They want to see that you can tell a visual story, that you don't cross the line of action. You don't really need to know how games work, because that's not what you're doing. You're telling a story, you're not figuring out gameplay. And for cinematics, since that's a smaller portion of the production, oftentimes those are freelancers or independent contractors. So sometimes if they have a staff artist who does multiple things, like some art directors or production designers, some illustrators that may be on staff, they could jump in and do some boards. But generally, when they've got a lot of cinematics to do, they're going to bring in some freelancers. Now for gameplay, for boarding for gameplay, those are gameplay boards are often really, really rough, and they're more often than not sketched up by the art directors and staff designers. They could bring in some freelancers, but that doesn't happen as often because generally people have to be intimately involved with what the game is that's being developed. Generally, all they're trying to do is just get through the idea of what's going to happen. So that's why everything stays so rough rather than doing tighter boards. With cinematics, it kind of depends on schedule. I've seen anywhere from just the roughest of rough boards to get an idea out to really tight, beautiful illustrated boards. And so you'll see a mix. For gameplay, they're going to want to see various combo actions and branches. So if we're doing this, this could happen. Go back to the beginning. If that happens, this other action happens. So they do want to know that you have knowledge of gameplay. So work at on other gaming games or in other gaming companies would be beneficial. But again, not a whole lot of freelance work for the gameplay boarding. One thing about your portfolio that you put together for games, they're not looking for you to present concept art. They want to see storyboards. They want to see you can visually tell a story. One of the things that that even in my studio that I see all the time, I'm not looking for the best artist. I'm looking for the person who can visually tell a story the best. There's a lot of better artists than me out there, and I'm the first to admit that, but I can tell a story like no one's business, which is why I'm a story artist, not a fine artist. So illustrators often don't make good storyboard artists. I've had a number of clients on different projects want to try to save money, so I've got a friend who's an illustrator, and I'll just have them do it. And they will always come back because they very quickly realize that an illustrator, without understanding how to visually tell a story, cannot do storyboards. Okay, so let me switch screens here, and I'm going to start taking you through some specifics in Storyboard Pro and kind of go over some things on how this will work in gaming for you. So let me switch my screens. Okay, so you should now be seeing this crazy alien guy. And all right, so I want to start here with just kind of talking briefly. I'm not going to get into every kind of button to hit because we only have another half hour or so before we do Q&A. And I'm kind of assuming that you know how to open and create new files. That's not, again, not the purpose of this. I want to focus on some of the really cool parts. So so let's talk about quickly kind of some of the differences in boarding for games than other kind of projects. So, for instance, this is a panel from a 2D project that I just directed called the Peculiar Adventures of Willow B. Star. And because this is 2D, it's actually kind of cutout animation style. The boards had to match the designs of the characters. Okay, so we had to be on model. And oftentimes in 2D, they need to be even tighter than this. But we were able to be a little bit looser on this one since it's cut out. Our assets are already created. But when you're doing generally 2D animation, you need to be really spot on because you're going to be using overseas studios and they're going to use your boards as layouts. For live action, it doesn't matter what your boards really look like as long as they don't look cartoony because your actors are your actors. Well, that's what happens with cinematics and for gaming boards. You can draw really loose, rough boards in gaming because your art is not going to affect the look of the characters. The assets are already going to be built. Now, often in gaming, the boards are going to be really, really rough. Generally, unless you're doing a presentation piece, you'll never see color. In fact, in any production boards, you'll never see color unless there's just spot color if you need it for, make sure someone understands this is blood or whatever. So rough boards, quick boards, just you need to know the kind of the size differences between the characters just so you can lay out the shots properly, but they don't need to be accurate to the look of the characters. One of the things that's really great about boarding, and a lot of these you'll find, a lot of the notes I'm going to make here you'll find are going to be similar whether you're boarding for gaming or boarding for any other type of production. But some of the things I want to make sure you guys see how great this software is, I'm going to cover as I'm going through. So for editing, because when we put these things together, you see I have the workspace here where I have the timeline underneath. So I can scrub it and I can actually see, and if I just hit play, everything's going to move. I can throw in as much audio as I want. It's really great. And one of the things I can do here is I can actually move. Let's say I want this shot of Willow and her dog to come before this shot of this wide shot of her car. Well, what I can do is I can just, I'm going to click on the first panel and shift click on the last one. So now I've selected that whole scene. Well, it's like 6 panels in that scene. And I can just click and I'm going to drag it to a new position and I'm going to let go. That quickly, I edited it. It's just like nonlinear editing in Premiere where I can drag my video clips around. Well, the scenes and shots and panels are just like video clips. I can drag them anywhere on my timeline and everything updates and all of a sudden, all I have to do is hit play, and I'm going to see it, see the new edit working. Now that also means that my numbering is going to change. So for instance, the scene before, this is scene 21, then it goes to scene 23, then it goes to scene 22. Well, obviously I want to fix that, so I'm going to go to the scene before. I can go anywhere in here, and this is how quick it is to renumber. And for those of you who work on paper or in Photoshop, and if you need to renumber, 157 scenes, you know what a pain in the ass that is. So check this out. I'm just going to go to Storyboard, and I'm going to drop down to Rename Scene, and I want to rename all the scenes after this one. So it shows here on the left the current scenes. You see how it's out of order on the numbers, and it renumbers automatically going through on the right. So I'm going to click OK. And now, let me double check, looking over here on the left or on panel up here, it's probably easier for you to see up here on the right. See, it's 21, 22, 23, yep, it's renumbered properly that fast. One click of a button, everything has been renumbered. Another thing, every artist likes to work differently as far as how they set up their levels, different layers here. So, and I have a very specific way that I like to work. Now, the default when you start with Storyboard Pro, when you load up the software, I'm going to hit New Scene right here. Okay, it's going to add 21A in between 21 and 22. Yeah, I'll accept that. The default is it's going to give you background and layer A. Well, those aren't enough. And like in Photoshop, every time you open up, you've got to create and rename all of your layers every single time you start a new storyboard page or a new storyboard panel. Well, that's incredibly time-consuming and wasteful. So what I do is I like working. Let's see if I can find which one of these. I guess really any of these will work. I like to have mine set up this way, where I've got my roughs. Let's see if that's the scene I want. Yeah. My rough layer, the background moving up from the bottom up, tone, inks, foreground, arrows, and notes. Okay, so here, that's actually a good one right there. That's the panel I like, because I do a mixture of bitmap and vector layers, which we can talk about later if we have time. So this is the layout that I want, and I'm always going to be sketching on my rough layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the rough layer, create all my layers just on one panel. Now I'm going to go over here to my layer drop down, and on the very bottom it's set layer layout as default. That's all I have to do. So now every time I hit a new scene, let's make a new one. Yeah, it's going to give me 9A. Look at that. It sets up all my layers exactly as I want. Every time I make a new panel or a new scene, it numbers them, and whichever layer I had highlighted will stay highlighted. So now when I hit new, I just start drawing, and I know I'm going to be drawing on the proper layer, on my rough layer. And for those of you who work in Photoshop, you know how annoying it is to be drawing for 20 minutes and realize, oh crap, I just drew everything on the wrong layer. So this really helps you out. Okay, so getting back to something very specific for working in gaming, one of the things as you're working in games, oftentimes you're going to have a number of pre-built assets, whether it's characters or props or environments. Well, they're going to be built in CG. Well, as long as production makes an FBX version file, in the next version of Storyboard Pro, there's going to be other formats, 3D formats that we can import as well. But for now, in FBX, which you can see listed right here, FB as in boy, X files, we can import a 3D object and use it in a 3D environment. So, for instance, there's this a plane right here that it's the same one I have right here in my library. So I can actually open up a library, which is just a folder that has files in it, and I can drag that in. It's going to convert my scene to 3D like you see here, and then I can move around my character. Let me I've also got here, if you've ever worked in a 3D program, you've got top view and you've got side view, and then over here I've got my camera, so I can move my camera around. So notice as I'm moving my camera in the side view, what happens on the left side of the screen? So it's real-time interactive here. And the reason you see that cloud moving around, the cloud is drawn on a separate layer. So here I have, it's just called layer A here. See, I could turn that on and off. So it's a 2D drawing in a 3D environment, which is very cool. And then I've got my plane here as a 3D layer. So I can also take and I can move around my object, and I can do it right here in the storyboard frame, and I can animate any of these moves as well. So again, any of these assets are just mine to use. So I can literally take this, and I don't have to redraw that freaking plane 28 times. You know, if we've got it as one of our assets, I can just put it right in there and work it, and then I can bring in my camera closer. Let me go to my camera. And notice as I bring it closer here, what happens on the left-hand panel. So it's very cool and very, very fast. And you can also build a 3D environment. So this is a larger file. So this takes a little bit more time. Let me expand this up, make it a little bit bigger again. There we go. So here I've got a 3D environment of kind of like inside a space station. So I can, as a character is moving, I can actually track with them. Now this is a 2D drawn character. So this the layer right here, I called this profile, right? So I can turn him on and off. And I can animate this whole thing. Now, when I'm saying I can animate things, let me go like here to this panel, because it'll work a little bit faster. If I want to make the shot last longer, I'll really just grab the back end and I drag it. I want to make it shorter so the car moves faster, I just make it shorter. As soon as I do it, I just hit play. It's in my finished piece. So unlike working in Photoshop and After Effects and then Premiere, everything I can do right in here. So it saves a tremendous amount of time, and as a board artist, as I'm working, I make my adjustments, I come up here, I hit play, and now I can see instantly, or is this how I want it all to work? So it makes me a better board artist. So, but using these environments, it's just absolutely amazing how cool this is. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you guys, and because it's a term that is misused all the time, which is pan. Okay, so in 2D, let's see if where I've got a good pan here. Well, they'll even call this a pan, all right, because it's a camera move. Any camera move in 2D animation is called a pan. But in 3D, that's not the case. And in live action and 3D are the same. A pan is where your camera is stationary and it pivots left to right. So for instance, the camera will stay still, and as the character walks by, we pan with it. All right, so it's just a pivot. Camera is not moving its location over the ground. If the camera is going to slide along with it like this, okay, this is called a dolly or a track. There's a couple different terms. Those are the main ones that we use. All right. So if you're moving with it, I'm tracking with the character or I'm dollying. All right. So I'm bringing that up because don't say, all right, so I want to pan with the character. No, this is dolly. This is pan. It's a totally different look. And it makes a big difference because if you say pan, the camera's going to set up something different than you might be thinking. All right, now here's something that will also really help you in gaming. All right, so right now we're looking at, oops, let me zoom in here, use one of my shortcut keys, the 1 and 2 key, or shortcuts. Okay, so you can see the gray line is the current border here, because that changes depending on where I am in my timeline. So if we're doing a first-person shooter game, I'm going to go back to my library of reference images here. If you're doing a first-person shooter game, you're going to be seeing generally a hand with a gun. And it's generally going to be the same guns and same hands over and over. Well, you don't need to redraw it. So using a library, I can draw it once. In fact, that's what I did here. On one layer, this layer here, I drew a gun with a hand. And then as a separate thing, I drew a fun little stormtrooper just because it was fun to do. But so let's say I want to shoot this guy here. Okay, so I'm going to say I'll put this in what layer? Let's make a new layer here for him. And I'm going to double click on that layer, rename it gun, that fast. So I'm going to drag out of my library right in. Now, I don't see it. Why don't I see it? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, because I'm in a 3D environment, I don't know where that's going to be. But as long as I open up my layer, I'm going to align this, and I'm going to pin it to the camera. All of a sudden now I see it. But by pinning it to the camera, whatever the camera does, the hand stays right there with it, just like it does in gaming. Now I can go to my stage view, because I can change views whether I'm seeing the camera view or stage view. I'll stay with camera view. So, and what I can also do is I can animate that layer. So even though it's pinned to the camera, let's say I want to have it move back and forth. So let's say I want to have the hand start, let's move it up into frame a little bit more. I want to have it start here, and then the end of that panel, I want it to be over here, so I'm not able to focus on the guy. See how it's sliding across the frame? That quickly I can animate a layer, same way I did the alien in the background, except I didn't have him pinned to camera. Now let's say I don't like that move. I'm going to go here to Layer, and I'm going to reset the transform, because it's called transform. When I animate a layer, it's called transforming. So just like that, I have it pinned to the camera. Now this can be used in a lot of different ways. You could do like the Superman thing. So Superman's POV, you'd see his two hands coming into frame. You can do the same thing and pin it. So no matter where your camera is moving and what else is happening, just pin it right to your camera. Do the same thing with on-screen text. If you don't want things to move around, you set it up that way. So let's say that we've got something else to show you how easy it is to use these this library. So I've got a folder called References. I keep it with where other files in other folders for each specific project. So let's say I'm going to have to redo, let's say I'm working on Battlefront and I need to redraw stormtroopers over and over. We're going to call him Storm Soldier for copyright reasons. Okay. So let's say this Storm Soldier, I know I'm going to have to draw him 50 times. Well, I don't want to draw him 50 times. So I drew it on one layer, as we can see here. I'm just going to drag that over into my library and let go. It's going to bring it in. It's going to ask me what I want to name it. Now, I've got a lot of programs open, so it's slowing down right now. So I'll just take a second. And I'll rename it however I'm going to, it would help me remember. Okay, so let's call it Storm Soldier. Okay. And now, if I scroll down, oh, here he is. So let's open up a new scene or a new shot, and I know I'm going to need him here too. I just drag him right in. That's not where I want him. That's okay. I just, whoops. I take him wherever I want. All right, you want to scale him down? Great. So if I want to copy and paste him, I can just do it that fast over and over. But check this out. Because in gaming you're going to be reusing things so often, there's something that's even better and faster. So let's go back over here. I'm going to highlight this character. So check this out. So when I go to my, once it's highlighted and I go to my pen icon, I can make any shape that's drawn on a vector layer with a vector line. I'll explain that in just a second. I can make that a brush. So over here, whenever you select a different different icon over here, tool to use, under Tool Properties tab over here on the right, get all the different options. Well, what I want here, the middle option is, if I hover over that, it's hard to do with a pen, New Dynamic Brush. So I'm going to click on that. So it just made a dynamic brush for me of the Stormtrooper. So whereas I was copying and pasting, now my brush is a Storm Soldier, sorry. So every time I click that fast, or I can click and drag, and I can make a whole group of them. But wait a minute, you say, what about, oh, that's too big. Well, it's like any other brush. I can just adjust the size here, and that fast, I can just drop them in. Now, if you don't want the overlap to worry, just make sure you fill in your character. And it'll all fill, all color, anything that's on that layer will work. Now, I had mentioned that this needs to be a vector line on a vector layer. So let me explain that just briefly, because it's the only way you can use these dynamic brushes. Let me go back to a regular brush so I can actually draw with it. Okay. I like drawing with a, let me open up a new bitmap layer here. Okay. I like using a bitmap brush, and let me zoom in here so you can see. So it looks like a pencil when I'm drawing, okay? So it's like, just like Photoshop, you know, if I draw really light, it's a thin line, right? And I like this, and where it gets darker and darker as I draw over it. Okay, that's the kind of line that feels good to me. So that's a bitmap line. Now I can go to a vector layer, and you can see over here on these little icons, the one that looks like sunset or sunrise, that's a bitmap. This one is vector, has the 3 different color shapes. Now where I'm on a vector, but notice the line looks exactly the same because I'm using a bitmap brush. I could put a bitmap brush on either. A vector brush is a very solid shape. So a vector brush I can only use on a vector layer, because notice if I go to bitmap layer, my vector brushes disappear. Or bitmap layer, my vector brushes disappear. So now I can still do thick and thin, but notice it's a very solid line. Any solid line here in vector, just like working in Flash, I can come in here and I can adjust any node, so I can adjust the line to look any way that I want it to. And that, let's say for some reason I like that as well, since it's highlighted. Oops. Let me highlight it, go to my brush, hit new dynamic brush, and boom, now I've got this shape that I can use over and over. And it's that fast, but I can only do that kind of manipulation with a vector line on a vector layer. Okay, enough about that. So in my library, a couple other great uses. Let me open up a new shot here. Center this. In fact, the fastest way to center, let's say go to, oh yeah, it's Shift M is my shortcut. Whoops. There we go. So in my libraries, I can bring in photos that quick and easy. And you know, I don't want to have that brush on there. Okay. I can also erase bitmap, portions of bitmap images. I can draw right onto the same layer if I want. Okay, so I can do anything I want here. Give me big evil ears, right? But I can also do other things. We saw that I can save drawings and bring drawings in. I showed you the 3D models, and the 3D models do work really fast. Here, let me show you. I'll bring in this. I've got this gun icon here, and this comes up. I drag that in, so the 3D layer was inserted. The scene will automatically be converted to 3D. Yep, I'm good with that. And there's my gun. So I can bring it in and and I can move it around any way that I want right in here. Okay, so it's really, really fast. But one other thing I can do is, you notice I've got audio here under my timeline. So I can actually have an audio folder in a library. And all I have to do, let's say I'm using Melva. Well, I'm just going to drag Melva's voice right down there. And I can cut it. I can move it around. I can change the volume. Just that quick. Now, here's a little tip, because in cinematics, you're going to be using audio all the time. So number your audio in order of your script. So here you'll see I've got 001, Ned, 002. Ned says the next line, 003 is Melva. So all I have to do is go through and I'll put in 1 first, then 2, then 3. And I know that I'm going to put everything in order. And then I can, let's see, I've got another Ned here that would come right afterwards. And if I do my voices on tracks 1 and 2, I can adjust and overlap however I want. But I can have unlimited levels of audio. So and now all I have to do is hit play.
I hear she's working on a brand new case.
All right, that fast, and I'm now creating an animatic, and I can adjust any of my shots, as I showed you earlier, to match the length, shots, panels, or scenes, to match the length of the audio. So honestly, I'm building everything in real time. Now, another quick thing to do is, again, I mentioned Photoshop, how often we draw on the wrong layers. All right, so for instance, here I've got 4 different layers that I'm sketching on. And let's say I want to sketch on my hand layer, here that I say gun, but without thinking about it, I'm still on my storm soldier layer. All right, so I'll grab this, and looking at it, as I'm drawing, I can't tell, but look at this. If I hit my light table right there, my auto light table, whatever layer I'm working on is the layer that's not grayed out. So now I know, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to draw on his layer, I want to draw on this layer. So the drawing area tells me, all right, now I can keep sketching. Let's give him some age spots on his arm, right? So I know I'm drawing on the right layer, and I don't have to go back and fix it later. So that's super, super fast. Okay, so one thing I want to show you real quick, because one of the things that you're going to do, and in just a minute we'll get into doing answering some questions for you guys. But you can also track changes. When you're working in games, just like any movie, the director's going to be making a lot of notes, and you're going to have to do changes. And there are times where you're going to give the file to the director or your supervisor, and they're going to go through and make notes on it. So how are you going to know, which one? If you look here, all these little things down here, all these different panels. So how am I going to know which one by having to go through everyone? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Under Storyboard dropdown, I'm going to go to Track Changes, and I'm going to select Auto Tracking Mode. So let's say, I always do notes on a notes layer, because that way I can turn it off, and I like drawing my notes in red. So let's say I put right in here, wrong expression, make happy. So how is my artist going to know to go through and change that? We'll look down here. I'm going to zoom in on that. That panel is now highlighted in yellow because I did a change to it. I'm going to come over here to this panel. I'm just going to put a dot on it. Whoops. I'm going to put 1 dot right there. Boom! Turns yellow because I did a change to it. So now, I'll zoom back out. When the artist gets the scene, goes, okay, where am I going to make change? Oh, here's 2 panels here that I know there's some notes on it. And then when they go through, I haven't hurt the artwork because I drew on a notes layer. Just turn off that layer. And then I can go through and I can validate the changes. As simple as this. So I'm going to go through Track Changes. I'm going to validate changes on this one. I'm going to validate it. Watch what happens down here on the yellow. Boop, goes away. So I've already done that. Now there's another way you can make a note too. Let's say on this shot on Melva, it's easier sometimes to describe what I need done than to write it. I don't want to write a whole essay. So on the panel tab, which is new for every single panel that you've got. I can just hit the record button. So this is called a voice annotation. So I'm going to record this. All right, let's say that Melva has now grown a full mustache and beard, and let's make her glass a little bit smaller. Stop. I can hit play to hear it. All right, let's say that Melva has now grown a full mustache. Okay, I know that's going to be good. I'm going to click OK. Now over here, it shows 1 of 1. So now as the artist sees that it's highlighted in yellow, as you see here on the timeline. All right, I don't see any notes. Look at the audio. Yep, there's voice annotation. All they do is hit play. All right, let's say that Melva is now, and I've got notes. So, I mean, again, I can go on and on all this, but one of the things that you've seen on this is how fast it is to make changes, and gaming moves quickly. So, by using Storyboard Pro, I can save about 10 steps for every time I do a change, rather than the classic way of drawing either on paper or in Photoshop, breaking down the layers, organizing all the layers, importing them into After Effects, doing whatever changes or moves in After Effects, taking it out of After Effects and bringing it into Premiere or whatever editing suite, lining it up with the audio, and seeing how everything works. If something doesn't work, I go all the way back to the original paper or the original Photoshop layer and start over. But if I'm in Storyboard Pro, and I want to, let's say, in this case, I want to make her eyes open just a little bit, right? That fast, now I can hit play. All right, it's one step. Saves so much time, and I can do this kind of thing real time and make changes and edits as I'm talking to a client, and I hit save and we're done. So this is what makes us better story artists in working in this software, is being able to instantly see if it's working or isn't working just by either scrubbing or just hitting play. And I like having my, I turned off that layer of audio. See, I like having the audio, even if it's a scratch track, just my own recording of voices. And you can record voices straight into your timeline as well. So for instance, I could, let's say I want someone yelling no right here. Well, over at line track 1, I'm going to right click over it, record sound. No! So then I'll title it. No, I can hit play to see if I like it. No! Perfect. I'm such a great actor. I'm going to click OK, and look, it popped right in. Now when I go to hit play, that fast. So there is no faster way of boarding and creating animatics and seeing what works. That's just what makes this so unbelievable. Let's see, Desi, do we have questions I need to answer? Because I've got a couple more things I could talk about, but I know we're getting close to the end of time.
We have a few questions, but you can keep going. Not a problem. Okay.
All right. So another thing that happens when we're boarding is, a couple things. One, I hate writing. Because first of all, my handwriting, if you couldn't notice from the notes here, it really sucks. And when you're doing cinematics, you've got scripted dialogue that need to be able to show up. Well, in the old ways on paper and Photoshop, generally we're handwriting everything. Well, in Storyboard Pro, I can actually take my entire script and I put it into the Storyboard tab here. All right, so I've got my entire script here. So I can actually take whatever line I want. I'm going to copy that, go to the panel, and I can just paste it right in there. Or if I've got action notes, let's find an action note here. Here, take that action note, go into panel. I'm going to just paste it right in. So now I don't have to type it up. I don't have to handwrite anything, and I can put everything in. Now, one of the things that I sometimes also have to do is sometimes you want to do an extra drawing of what a prop might look like or the layout of a room so that production understands. Well, you don't want to draw it on the, it's distracting, if you see a sketch like that, right? You don't want that on the panel, but you might want it with the panel. So here's what I can do. I can come over here and pull up the menu next to these dialog boxes, and I'm going to click on Add Sketch. Okay, I can name it whatever I want, but under Sketch, so now I can draw right in here. Set layout. So it's if I want a 3-wall set. And I can do camera here, and I'll go M for Melva, and P for Pauline, right? So I can draw whatever I want, you know, if I just want to do a smiley face for someone. And that'll show up either underneath or to the right of your storyboard panels. Again, it's a great way to add extra notes in. Exporting, oh my God, it's so fast on this. So under File, I can export to a movie, either MOV or MP4, really almost anything you want, but MP4s are the smallest files, easier to send around. I can export bitmaps. Usually it's going to be JPEGs, but you know what? I can actually export a layered Photoshop. So however I have my layers set up here, it'll keep them numbered that way and set up a PSD file for you as well. And I can do one at a time, a scene at a time, or the entire project, or selected sequences. For instance, if I want to hit selected scenes, I can just come in here and click and drag. All right, 6 through 10, I'm going to export those. So for every single panel, it's going to export those. But one of my favorite things is, even when I'm delivering to clients individual JPEGs, that's a lot of individual files. I also send them a PDF. So for export PDF, we've got lots of presets in here, and I have my own ways that I like to, which I talk about in my lynda.com videos, is how to customize these so they look exactly the way you want them. Animation generally does 3 panels horizontal. Live action does 3 panels vertical. But I can also set up where it's going to have 12 panels on a page. It'll do what the entire project, you know, or selected scenes, however much you want, into one PDF. So now it's just one file to open, and a single click to print the entire thing. So that really helps production a lot. So I generally tend to want to give them a PDF as well as individual JPEGs. And for pitching, of course, I could just pitch doing this and hitting play. But if I want a bigger image, so this is really cool. So there's something here we call pitch mode. Oops, oh, it's again, I've got too many projects open right now. But I can go into pitch mode, which I will as soon as my computer decides to stop acting up. Oh, hold on a second. We've got multiple screens over here, so what you can't see is what I'm doing in the background. So give me just a second. I'm going to open this back up, and I'll show you the pitch screen. And what's great about the pitch mode that we have is the image fills most of the screen, but I can still draw notes on it. Okay. So I'm going to go to my pitch mode. So in pitch mode, obviously the screen gets a lot bigger. I still see all my text and comments on one side, and the layout is different. So now we see all the thumbnails here on the left. So I can go anywhere I want, and I can step through them one at a time, or I can hit play. Oh, I have part of my audio turned off. Let me go back real quick. Well, I don't need to turn the audio on. But what I can do here is, you know, let's say we get in here and you're going through a pitch and the director goes, wait a minute, I don't want the brush there. I want the brush here in her hand. Okay? So watch what happens when I close my pitch mode and I go back into regular drawing. It's in there, but it added a comments layer I can turn on and off. It doesn't affect my actual artwork, so it doesn't hurt the artist at all. But in pitch mode, goes right to everything else, and it automatically sets up its own layer for it. So it's just, again, it's such a fast, great way, and you can do these long distance. If I shared my screen over Skype as I'm working, this is the easiest way for everyone to see it because the image is going to be the biggest on their screen. So I can add in any number of notes that I want as I'm working. Okay, so Desi, let's answer a couple questions.
All right, let's answer a couple. So we'll start with, we're going to go back to voice. So Don is asking, therefore the voice annotation is not part of the timeline audio. Correct.
Yeah, the annotation is just notes for the artist or the director, so they can listen to it without affecting anything. As I showed you, I can record by clicking over my my audio tracks. There, I can record sound directly into my timeline, or if you record separately, as I showed you using the library, and I can import different ways. But I have a folder with all my audio files that I keep in the library I can drag in. Or if you don't have your library set up, I can come over here to import audio, this icon that looks like a musical note on the bottom left, and click that, and then now I'm just importing an audio that I can literally look wherever I want and decide how I want it to import.
Cool. Eric is asking, how would you animate the arm and gun if you also wanted to have a, in quotations, reload animation while keeping the transform motion within the panel?
I would have multiple versions of the gun. So let me go over to where we have here. So what I would do in that instance, is if I've got a reload version of the gun, and let's see, what would be the easiest way to do that? So I'm going to, so if I've got this, let's say the reload is just, it's in a different, I'm going to put that on a higher layer, Control V. So let's say reload, the gun just pops up. So, I've got these on different layers, right? What I would do is have, where did I put it here? Oh, I don't have it in that scene anymore. I would cut the scene into extra panels. And so I would just use various versions of this drawing for every panel. So let's see. Let me do probably the easiest way just to show you. I'm gonna have two different guns. So once that imports, I'll show you the second gun, and I'll just do a real quick idea for you on how I set that up. So I've got gun and gun 2. Okay. So in this panel right here, I'm going to bring in my gun layer. Why don't I see it? Oh, it's down way low. Okay, so let's say, if I want the reload to happen in the middle of this, let me zoom, whoops, let me zoom back in on this for you a little bit. All right. So what I'll do, let me just drag this whole frame down to the end so we see it. All right, so there's the scene. So right in the middle, I want to reload. So I'm going to cut the scene right here. So I'm going to go Storyboard, and I'm going to split panel at current frame. So my one panel is going to cut into 2. Notice here. But I'm going to have a third one. So I'm going to cut it again, and you'll see why here in a second. So split panel at current frame. Now all 3 of these are look exactly alike. Notice as I'm scrubbing, nothing's changing. So it's the second one. I'm going to take my gun 2. I'm going to drag it in. I'm going to grab that gun layer. I'm going to bring it up to line it up. Okay. And I'm going to turn off my gun 1. So now there's reload and then back again. So that quickly, but what it means is I'm going to do separate panels on it. Now what I can also do is I can spread layer motion. So let's say I'm gonna animate, and then we'll move on. I want the hand to go from here over to shooting him right in the eye. Okay, so my beginning position is here. I'm gonna go, my ending position is right at the eye. So in this first panel, I've got that move. Everyone can see that, but then it doesn't move on the next two. Okay, so I need to make a quick adjustment. Let's see, gun. I need to do a quick adjustment on what layer I'm on here. Hold on. And we're back again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is under layer, I'm going to spread layer motion right here. And I'm going to do all panels in the same scene. So what this is going to do, it's going to take the motion that I set up in the first panel, it's going to spread it on that same layer by all three. So notice now as I scrub, the hand is moving, but it's very consistent. I don't have to try to set up each individual panel, that layer. I don't have to animate it. I can animate one layer, and as long as they're all layered the same in the same location, I can spread the motion of one layer over the entire scene or shot. Anyway, it's a real quick way to describe it. On lynda.com, I get into a lot more detail on it.
Okay, so we're over time, but there's one more question I'd like to have answered quickly. It's from Don. Are there default arrows to indicate directions, turns, zoom in or out of place into the drawing of the storyboard?
Yes, there are. And let's see if I have them in here, because yep. All right, so part of Storyboard Pro, there's some default libraries. Under templates, you've got actions. So here you can see a number of different types of arrows. Any one of these I can just drag right in. They are vector, so I can manipulate them however I want, make it as big or as small, stretch it, squeeze it, however I want, and drop it right in there. So there's any number of different arrows that are in here. I personally like drawing my own. And if I want one of my own, I can just simply, let me go to a layer that has nothing drawn on it. Let's say I want an arrow that looks like this. All right, so I can literally just take that layer and I can drag it right in. It's going to add it to the library. I can name it, I'll name it curve right. And it should be right up here. Yep, there it is, curve right. Okay, so yeah, there are things there and you can add to it as you want.
That's great. Once again, you did an amazing job, Mark. Thank you so much. There are questions we didn't get to, but if you can, please email us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them via email as soon as the webinar is over. So the email address to send your questions to is webinars@toonboom.com, and we'll be sure to have Mark answer them or guide you in the right direction. This webinar is being recorded and will be online shortly within the next few days, and that's about it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and see you next time. And thank you, Mark.
You bet. Thanks, everyone. Glad everyone could show up with us. And thanks, Des, for putting all this all together for us.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.